Welcome back to Confirmation. And in today's lesson, we're covering Lesson 19 on the types of sin and the law and gospel distinction. At this point in our confirmation journey, hopefully these concepts are more of a review for you than new information. But just in case, we want to make sure that you understand first, what is the law and what is the gospel, and how do we understand these things? So first, let's talk about, the law. And the law, we would say, we have three different uses of the law, three ways in which the law is presented. So the first one, we typically call it the curb. And the idea here is that just like you're going down the road, a curb on the side, if you veer into it, it will remind you, oh, you're not allowed to go over there. Without the curb, you might accidentally go off into the sidewalk and run someone over. That's not good. So the curb is there to protect the people on the sidewalk and also you. In real world circumstances, we might call this like the laws that we have in our land, right? Hey, you're not allowed to go and just murder someone because there are consequences here. That will go poorly for you. The police force, that's a curb for us. Hey, don't do this thing. It is bad for you to do. So those kind of punishments or those kind of consequences often are a law for us, and that's the curb. The problem is that we always jump the curb. We do this all the time. We break the law. Maybe not in terms of stabbing someone to death or running people over, but we certainly break God's law. We run over the curb and we sin. And that's what the second use of the law does, is it shows us that sin. And we call that the mirror. Just like if I walked up to a mirror and I looked real close, I could see wrinkles and I could see blemishes and I can see all kinds of things that I don't like about myself. That's what the law does, is it shows us all of our imperfections. It shows us how we have fallen short of God's glory. And then there is a third use of the law, and that's the guide. Now the third use is only used by Christians. You see, the first two uses, those are universal. Everyone understands the curb. Hey, there are things you're not allowed to do, and that we do. There's ways that we fall short, the mirror. But after the mirror, we're pointed to Christ, and we're pointed to the grace that's ours in Jesus. And as a result of receiving his grace, now we begin to ask, wow, I can't believe you love me that much. How then should I live? What now should I do? And that's what the guide does. The guide is, this is what you've been created to do. This is how you've been created to live. And so go and do those things. Now, the problem with that is we don't follow the guide very well, and then we end up right back at the mirror. And so over and over, we have this cycle where we receive the law, we break the law, we receive God's grace, and then we receive a new law, a new response. And then we don't respond, and then we sin, and then we receive God's grace over and over and over and over again. And those are the three uses of the law: curb, mirror, and guide. Those are the ways we talk about it. Now, we've talked about the idea of sin. We all know that we do this, but did you know that there are three kinds of sin? The first kind is what we call original sin. This is the sin you were born with. I was born with. Think of if you've ever been a babysitter, or if you've ever had a babysitter, or if you ever talked to one. A babysitter will tell you, and a parent will tell you, that you don't have to teach a child to disobey you. You don't have to teach a child to lie. You don't have to teach a child to say no or mine. These things are just within us. And these are expressions of original sin. Now, really, original sin is just this sin that we have been born with from the time we were conceived. And so we don't come out of the womb, we are not born neutral, we're born bad, evil. That's what most parents, even though we call them, oh, you're so cute, you're so innocent, not really, because all of us are born sinful and unclean. We need God's good gifts of grace. And that's why we run to baptism, because that's what takes care of original sin. It means that we're no longer held guilty because of that sin. Instead, it's all accounted to Christ. So original sin is often just the condition in which we were born. And it's our propensity to sin, our inclination to sin. Then there's two more active ways or types of sin. There's sins of commission, which is the bad stuff you do that you shouldn't do. And then there's sins of omission, the good stuff we should do but don't. And oftentimes we like to talk about sin only as the sin of commission, right? I did a bad thing. I sinned. And that's true. I mean, that certainly is a kind of sin. But imagine, and Luther would have us imagine, that we walked by someone who was starving to death and did nothing for them, didn't love them, didn't care for them, didn't take care of them at all. And Luther would say, that too is sin. No, you didn't do a bad thing, but you didn't do a good thing. You abstained from that. You omitted that good thing that you should have done. And so when we look at the three types together, the sin that we're born with, the sin that we commit, and the good things that we don't do, sins of omission, all of that together, well, we're in a pretty bad space. It doesn't leave us any room to maneuver or to justify ourselves because we are sinful through and through. Now, at this point, we've talked about the law, we've talked about sin and how we break the law. And if the lesson ended here, then we would all be pretty miserable. Because the law has done its work. The law convicts us. It tells us that we aren't perfect. And so that's why we need the gospel. Because the gospel is the thing that alleviates that guilt. See, the law, it's one of those things that's going to point us to our sin, show us our sin, make us understand our need for a Savior. But the gospel shows us our salvation. It shows us Jesus, and it tells us what God has done for us. In your lesson, you're going to go through a few passages and try to guess which ones are mainly law and which ones are mainly gospel. And as you do, I hope you'll see that, well, one, that there's law and gospel in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament. But second, I hope that you take comfort in knowing the grace that's yours in Jesus. That you're not saved because you do enough. You're not saved because you didn't do as many bad things. You're not saved because of you. You're saved because of Jesus. And that's where our hope is, that's where our faith is, and that's our reality as Christian believers. So, have fun with this lesson. Enjoy this conversation. And if I have one more challenge for you, I would say this. When you go into a worship service, when you hear a sermon, when you go to a Bible study, ask yourself, where are you hearing God's law? And where are you hearing God's gospel? Because they're both true and they're both for you. So I'll see you next time.